Thank you very much, Wyman. And again, a warm welcome to all participants. A warm welcome to all speakers. My name is Samia Malham. I'm a global lead of digital government at the World Bank Group, and I'm very pleased and honored to be with you all today with our great speakers and in the context of digital governance in the post-pandemic world. This is one of the last sessions from the SDG 16 conference. Many of you have been there with us for several days, and as part of knowledge sharings, good practices, and what have we learned from the pandemic. So this panel will really focus on the role of digital government and how important it has been for countries to pivot to online. As you all know, it's been 15 months that the world is in a shutdown, and it's thanks to digital that governments and public administrations have been able to function, issue permit, issue certificate, whether it's birth or business, and miscellaneous services all going online. The same thing has gone for health, for education, for local government. So we are seeing increased interest and scrutiny as to how to make digital government work for the whole world, not just for a few nations, and how to make it inclusive for all, not to accentuate the existing digital divides that exist already between the haves and the have-nots, between the cities and rural areas, etc. So I'm very honored to introduce our panel. We have 5 speakers who will be speaking to this topic based on their own experience in their countries. And I'm going to introduce them in the following order. They're all going to introduce the topic and their experience for 5 minutes each. Then we're going to turn on to the audience, get some of the questions on the chat, and enable them to answer. Let me just say that this event is recorded and that for all participants, if you want to provide comment, feedback, questions, do use the chat. So we're going to start. We're starting with Mrs. Carol Roach, Acting Director, Transformation and Digitization Department, Office of the Prime Minister, the Bahamas. Welcome, Mrs. Roach, and we will start with you. But before that, let me also introduce Mr. Cho Ho Chan, Government Chief Digital Technology Officer at the Government of Singapore, Smart Nation and Digital Government Office. Welcome, Mr. Chan. We will then have as speaker number 3, Mr. Anir Chowdhury, Policy Advisor, Aspire to Innovate program at the Government of Bangladesh for the ICT Division, Cabinet Provision and UNDP. Welcome, Mr. Anir. Very good to have you with us. I'm introducing several colleagues that I have met recently at the expert group meeting with the UN, with UNDESA. So it's great to see everyone again. Mr. Alexander Barboza, representing Brazil. He is head of the Regional Center for Studies on the Development of the Information Society. Welcome, Mr. Barboza. And last but not least, Mrs. Nevena Manic, who's the advisor for the government of Serbia's Office of the Prime Minister. So welcome to our 5 speakers. And I'd like to get started with Carol. We've had a few guiding questions for the sessions that the participants could see on the online version, which is basically, I'm just going to summarize and ask each of the speaker, in which way has public service delivery been sustained through COVID-19? How did your government manage to pivot in a very abrupt and sudden way? How are you dealing with the haves and have-not? How are you dealing with civil servants that may not have been trained to conduct business digital, people that were on front office desks, dealing face-to-face with customers, now having to do all these transactions on a digital mode? And then looking forward for the next few years, how do you see all this acceleration impacting the adoption and uptake of digital government in your country? So without further ado, let's start with Carol. Carol, the floor is yours. Please, 5 minutes each, not more for every speaker. Carol.
Samia, I believe Carol connection just dropped. We had some difficulty earlier. I suggest we will move to the next panelist while we try to get her online.
Sure. We'll move, no worries. Sorry, Carol, if you hear us, we'll get you back on time. This happens. So we'll move to Singapore with Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen.
Hi, good morning, good evening, good night, everybody. Well, it's like it's past 12 o'clock here in Singapore, but well, we will continue. Now, we talk about the pandemic, right? And I think in Singapore, we're very lucky because digital government journey has started probably as much as 8-9 years ago in Singapore. So, you know, you talk about preparations, etc., in terms of being ready for an event like this. We are lucky that things have already been in place for a long time. Even before the pandemic struck, more than 97%, I think, of all our digital services, all our services in government actually has a digital option. So, you know, to be able to pivot very quickly in a situation like this has been not too difficult for us because, as I said, the work's been done. I think one of the most important thing that you'll find very quickly is that when the pandemic struck, I don't think anybody is prepared for this. But the good thing about Singapore at that time is that within the government itself, we have a very strong digital development capability. The government of Singapore within GovTech itself has close to 900 engineers doing all kinds of things from application development to data science to AI to sensors and IoT, etc. And this is where the proofing point was. I think like many of you will say later on that, you know, you're caught really totally unaware. You think that things needs to be done very quickly, and it is. You know, we were asked to do things in weeks rather than months or years, which is quite common in government. We didn't have time to go and tender for things. We just got our engineers to start working very quickly on solutions, whether it's Trace Together for contact tracing, which we took something like 4 or 5 weeks to build. We built the Trace Together token in like about 6 weeks also. We built Safe Entry, which is a way of allowing all the shopping malls, etc., to open, at least track people when they enter and scan their temperature, all these things. All this within weeks. And the only reason why we could do it within weeks is because we got the engineers. You know, we didn't have to go out there and procure. Our engineers actually was just dropped their tools on some other stuff and started doing very meaningful work for the rest of Singapore. So that's very important. I think that was really the key thing that helped us out significantly. The other thing that I think is important is that we were accelerating the pace of adoption of digital government in the last 5 to 7 years. And now with the COVID pandemic, even though it's not a big problem for us in Singapore right now, the pace of acceleration of digitalization will double or triple, even 4 or 5 times. Why? Because now people are so used to working from home. People are used to really dealing with the government and the commercial sector online that we think there's no turning back. There's really no turning back to this. And the reality is that you accelerate at a tremendous pace. So, you know, trying to pull the industry together, trying to galvanize society, trying to be able to ensure that we are serving everyone is going to be important. So like even within the pandemic phase, when we launched Trace Together, which was an app, we realized it was not good enough. So we had to create tokens because we know that the older people, the less privileged sometimes and the less educated may want to use a device simpler than a phone. Even though Singapore has a mobile phone penetration of 1.5 times per person actually, 150% actually. But we still created options to allow people who are the less privileged, the older people, etc., to truly be integrated in the digital economy going forward. And this kind of approach and attitude will continue in Singapore for post-pandemic, basically. And I think the last point before I wrap up is that I think the key thing to digitalization is capabilities. The more capabilities you're able to develop within your country, whether it's within the government or within the so-called the commercial community, that's so important. Because if you don't have that, and you rely on the age-old way of system integrators, etc., it's going to be very difficult, and life will be much slower than what we are experiencing today. So with that, thank you very much for the time on the floor, and we'll answer more questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chen. And as Vincenzo said, we're so thankful that you are with us. It's very late your time, and we know how dedicated you are to the cause of digital government. And it's thanks to you and many champions that I think we are seeing best practices. So I just want to comment on one of the points Mr. Chen made. You know, when we look at digital capabilities, it is no surprise to me when I analyze the top 10 countries that are almost always there performing at the UN EGDI, the top 10 ranked countries, that there is a very strong relation between the digital capabilities, the performance, and the trust also between people and their government. And in my view, governments that have really leveraged technology, like in the case of providing token for the elderly that were not very confident or had trust in using technology, I think this is a step, an additional step, building more trust and getting people closer to government. And that will definitely help in the future. So thank you very much, Mr. Chan. I'm sure we are going to get more questions from I think we have 57 participants. That's incredible. Thank you very much, participants. Let's now move to Carol. Carol may not be able to have her video, but at least we can listen to her. Carol, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Sorry about that, everybody. Thank you, Samia. Thank all the organizers for the opportunity to be here. A government must be able to connect in time of crisis to its citizens and residents. They need information, services, and goods. For communications and collaboration, the government of the Bahamas took advantage of a 90-day virtual meeting platform, which allowed our cabinet and permanent secretaries to convene virtual meetings for strategizing, planning, and executing undertakings. There were meetings for pandemic response teams, such as the Food Network Program, COVID-19 Task Force, and the Economic Recovery Committee. We implemented a virtual call center for the COVID-19 hotline, education hotline, social services assistance call center, and the government ICT help desk. We increased the number of government email accounts to provide another channel of communication. Initiatives. We did our first release of the COVID-19 health travel visa. You know, this was very important for our economy to be able to open back up. We expanded the learning management system and education management system for education and schooling online. Our COVID-19 tracking and monitoring solutions were built from platforms we already had existing in the government. We created collaboration websites for the government so that they can share documents. You know, governments are very filing cabinet oriented. So we were able to provide space for persons to store documents electronically. Online service initiatives were fast-tracked. Social services for our food and rent programs went online. We launched our My Gateway government portal so that persons can do passport renewals, apply for birth, marriage, and death certificates, and renewal of driver's license. Our Port Department was able to put on their permits and licensing. And of course, this is an economic plus for us, so we can have cruises to come in. We've launched the Bahamas e-cabinet management information system to improve decision-making process, e-courts pay for court ordered payments. And one that we're really proud of is the DigiPay digital platform that allows our government services to integrate with payment service providers. And something that you may have seen in the news is the Bahamas' first digital currency, which we launched for the underserved and the underbanked communities. We have partnered with many developers to launch things, for example, the Food Network Program, a second version of our Bahamas health visa, and our COVID vaccine appointments. So what does success look like? Thousands have been fed through the Food Network program. We've processed over 400,000 international travel visas and 100 domestic ones. 2,000 persons registered for social assistance through digital wallets, many using online channels for social assistance. About 5,000 registered on My Gateway and 2,000 transactions completed, 30,000 persons vaccinated. We have a very high mobile device penetration and a very high mobile data penetration, both over 90%. But despite this, households needed access to laptops and tablets for children to participate in online school. Through private sector partnerships, thousands of laptops and tablets were distributed, improving the percentage of homes with internet accessible devices. The government's Internet in the Park initiative with internet service providers was accelerated with more parks coming online, bandwidth boosts, and hours of access extended. Even with this, we are not ignorant to the fact that online services have been both a welcomed value add for some and an unnavigable disruption for others. Recognizing that many youths are savvy internet navigators, we ensure that our services are can be understood by 11-year-olds. Processes are simplified by reduction of steps and removal of deterrents like uploading of documents or long application forms. Our interfaces are user-friendly across all devices. Disruption is inevitable, and with transformative change through fast-paced innovation and technology. However, we cannot allow this to paralyze us. Instead, we must diligently find ways to reduce negative impacts. We have established a change management unit for focus on education and awareness. We have prolifically posted how-to videos and images on social media, which has contributed to our successes. We see women helping women, women helping men, and youth helping both. We see adoption slowly taking hold, but we know that we have much left to do. The government is attentive to the fact that digital literacy is a stumbling block to its citizenry and its employees, and has made it a priority to rectify this. The government also realizes the need for upskilling and capacity building in ICT within public institutions and the entire country. It is envisioned that the digital literacy and digital skills program will be multitask, multi-stakeholder initiative with strong involvement with private sector, academia, and civil society. Lastly, the government is actively improving legal framework for data privacy and protection, cybersecurity, and the protection of the vulnerable. We are also working on initiatives to improve increased opportunity for citizen engagement. We are focused on positioning the people and country not only to be resilient in the time of crisis, but also able to thrive in one, leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol, for giving such a comprehensive summary of the enormous work that has taken place. And listening to you, I feel the government of Bahamas, like all the governments that are represented here, has in 1 year realized progress like, an intense period of 10 years. And even though digital allows us to do so, there's the human capacity to absorb all that change and really espouse it and adopt it. So I'm really very keen to learn more, and maybe we'll get questions later on the change. And really all do the right thing. And then there's the issue of human capacity to absorb for society that needs more digital skills or civil servants. So excellent. And thank you very, very much, Carol, for hearing the case of the government of the Bahamas. Now we are moving to Asia, to the government of Bangladesh. And I'd like Mr. Chowdhury, policy advisor, to give us his take on what Bangladesh has been doing. Mr. Chowdhury.
Thank you very much, Samia. Can you hear me properly? Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on, obviously, Singapore, it's very late, so it's post good evening, I suppose. It's getting to be morning for you, Mr. Chow. Just listening to Singapore and Bahamas, similar experience in Bangladesh as well. So I'll talk about some of them, but in the 5 minutes or so that I have. But let me talk about the approach. I think there are 3 things that we did that really helped us accelerate. And obviously, COVID was an accelerator of digital adoption, like in many countries. Same things happened in Bangladesh. So 3 things that happened as approaches, strategies for us. One is to repurpose the digital assets that we've been developing for the last 10 to 12 years. Since the beginning of the Digital Bangladesh Declaration by our Honorable Prime Minister in late 2008, we've been developing, we were a late starter, but we tried to accelerate as much as possible with developing different types of digital assets, and I'll talk more about them, and putting them together just like Lego blocks to create new solutions in the time of pandemic was an important strategy for us. Second was data became very important. Data to drive policymaking in real time, data to actually develop new solutions with understanding of where we are at in terms of life and livelihood. That was also very important. And the third thing is unprecedented public-private partnership in the way that we have never seen before. Government organizations which never worked together or were not able to work together came together. Private sector came together, telco especially, telemedicine companies came together to provide services. So I would say repurposing, data-driven policymaking, and PPP were the cornerstones of what we did. And I'll talk about maybe a few examples of what happened. Offices were closed for about 9 weeks. So we had a decision support system within the government, which runs in about 8,500 offices of the government. That's about half the government offices, office of bureaucracy. And that was the lifeline for the entire government decision-making. Without that, we would not have been able to make critical decisions for supporting food security, supporting health decisions. So that became the lifeline that we call e-filing. WhatsApp became very important in terms of, so WhatsApp actually broke down silos. We had ministers talking on WhatsApp, making decisions, policies, and we did not need physical meetings, which would have otherwise taken weeks to set. And we would have to figure out who would be sit at the head of the table. So WhatsApp actually broke down protocols also. So something to think about, that we can make decisions with our protocols. 333 was a helpline in Bangladesh that is used up until 2019. We launched in 2018, so up until 19 we used it for serving citizens with critical information. They would call in. That was repurposed for self-reporting of symptoms. We did not have enough RT-PCR labs in a country of 165 million. We had 1 lab in last March-April timeframe. So we had to have people calling into the system and report their symptoms through an IVR system, and we used artificial intelligence to understand where the disease was progressing the fastest. And we would be able to make intervention, health intervention, so ICUs or additional doctors and nurses based on this information 7 to 10 days before testing actually began in those locations. So this was a remarkable public-private partnership, telco data, hospital data coming together to make decisions in an anonymized way. We use the same system to provide food support. So people locked down in their houses, underserved families who lived on daily wages needed food. And they would call into this number and we would actually verify and then provide food support. This same system gave rise to overnight, not overnight, over a period of weeks, I would say, telemedicine services, which were not popular before COVID. Because of COVID, became very, very popular. We had about 4 million calls in a matter of months. A dedicated helpline, health line was set up for COVID patients. We supported about 450,000 COVID patients in a very organized way with this dedicated COVID line. We set up a line for pregnant women and lactating mothers, supported about 300,000 women through that guidance and treatment. Social safety net, new social safety net had to be created almost overnight to support about 5 million families. And we used the EKYC, electronic know your customer regulation that we had just passed just before COVID. That was used to create bulk accounts to support about 5 million families, newly poor, and also about 4 million garment workers. Only about a fraction of them, about 40% of them were digital before. During COVID, all of them opened mobile wallets. So all 4 million garment workers actually were paid using mobile wallets. We developed dashboards which would bring in data from hospitals, telcos, travel, mobility to understand what was happening. And these dashboards were used by cabinet, used by district administrators across the entire gamut. Some unexpected acceleration happened. So we've been trying to get our Parliament TV being used as education TV for years. Even with the permission of the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the Parliament, we're not able to get it done. In 7 days, when COVID forced our schools to close, about 43 million students in our primary, secondary education system. So we overnight converted Parliament TV as education TV. It's still going on because we have not opened schools yet. So that was an unexpected acceleration. Court system that we've been trying to digitize for years did not accept digitization. COVID made it happen because of overcrowding in prisons. Bail petitions were all piling up, and Chief Justice decided with the Prime Minister that we would open up bail hearing on video conferencing. And we repurposed the administrative system in 12 days to do bail hearing, and we reduced overcrowding in prisons in two months by about 11%. So these are unexpected gains that happen. Now we're exploring telco-based poverty ranking. So this was actually successfully piloted in Togo, and we're using the same technology and AI-based technology to see if change in mobile behavior can give us a proxy, a useful proxy for poverty ranking. And we'll be using this for real-time targeting for social safety net. So I'll end with a few challenges that have come up. So I think a colleague from Bahamas actually talked about some of these things. But privacy became a big concern. So we're using a lot of private data, telco data, medical data, travel data to make policy decisions. So again, whether we crossed boundaries in a time of crisis, we don't know. We're going back and checking that, and now we are working on a data privacy legislation, data protection legislation. Also, we saw data sharing agreements were not in place. So data from health being used by different government agencies without any kind of data sharing agreements. Telco data we're using within government. So again, data sharing agreements are needed in future. We saw digital divides, new forms of digital divides coming up. So since we had over 1,000 services online, so people could go to digital centers. We have about 6,000 digital centers across the entire country. People could go to them if they don't have digital literacy or affordability to access these services. So they could go to these centers and pay a small fee and access these services. So that was okay. Health with telemedicine was also somewhat covered. But what suffered greatly was education. Even with moving our content online and with TV, we probably supported about 20% of the students online using internet and about 55% using TV. So we are facing this massive gap, almost a year and a half by the time schools open up. So what do we do? That's a big concern. The last thing I'll end with is institutional capacity and individual capacity within government and within society. So that's where a lot of skills development are needed, not just for digital skills development, but using in a blended manner. So the combination of analog and digital, how do we make the most out of digital in an analog world and vice versa? So those are new issues that are coming up. So I'll stop there, Samia, and maybe take questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chowdhury. Again, a very comprehensive overview and really commend the government of Bangladesh for all this amazing effort. Some of the data you provide, 7 days instead of years, 12 days for the digitization of court. I mean, these are amazing results. And we take note of all the challenges that you've mentioned. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of questions on that. I have myself a few for you. And next, we're going to our fourth speaker, Mr. Alexander Barboza. He's the head, as I said, of the Regional Center for Studies on Development of Information Society in Brazil. So we're going to Brazil now. Mr. Barboza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Samia, and good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is indeed a great pleasure to be part of this debate. I just want to start by acknowledge and I add my voice to what Mr. Ani has just mentioned about the importance of data for decision making. This is really very important. But I'd like to address the issue of sustainability of public service delivery during the COVID-19 crisis, relating it to the issue around digital divide in Brazil. And in my opinion, digital government has became a critical component to to build and to maintain trust in public institutions, and of course, a critical component to deliver public services, and with a great potential to work as a channel for citizen engagement and participation. So digital government, I would say, has also the potential to promote a socially fair transition towards economic growth, social inclusion, and sustainable development, particularly in countries from the global south. However, this potential can be greatly decreased by the high levels of inequality in countries where digital divide is still a barrier. And the COVID-19 pandemic, as has been already said, has triggered important changes in society, and we became more digital than ever, I would say. The pandemic has underscored even more the importance of digital technologies for the survival of enterprise, labor, education, and so on and so forth. I would say that we have two situations. On the one hand, the pandemic has offered many examples of how digital government was able to leverage the offer of public service and access to information. And since the beginning, all of us knew that the pandemic, when the pandemic started, the digital government had the potential to accelerate the shift towards bringing citizens closer to government. But the second point, on the other hand, the pandemic has also exacerbated important connectivity issues, revealing existing digital inequalities in countries like Brazil, or in my region, I would say Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, and so on. We can easily conclude that the digital transformation process in which digital government is embedded in, is happening at a fast pace, but not for everyone. And perhaps one of the clearest example that I could give to illustrate the distance between the potential and the practical realization of the benefits of digital transformation is to look at what's happening to the digital government. Among the multiple dimensions of digital transformation capable of promoting sustainable development are, without any doubt, the dimensions of digital government and digital inclusion. And in Latin American region, for instance, where I come from, important progress has been made in the development of digital government, including innovative mechanisms for citizenship participation, digitalization of public services and procedures, increased transparency, accountability, and so on. However, these developments are given in a context in which a significant proportion of the population is still digitally excluded. So, although the digital government can undoubtedly have a deep impact on how government work and interact with citizens in many countries, such as Brazil, its benefits still do not reach the whole population. In other words, among the barriers that are interposed between the poorest and most vulnerable citizens and the digital government are the access gap and the digital skill gap. And to conclude, I would like to share with you very briefly, some findings from the survey conducted here in Brazil by CETIC during the pandemic, just to illustrate the issue of access to digital government. We have realized that 54% of internet users sought information about health or public service, or carry out public services online during the pandemic, against 36% in the pre-pandemic period. It's a high increase. We also found that a 32 percentage points increase in the access to information or public services carried out online related to labor rights or social welfare benefits, such as social security, unemployment insurance, emergency relief, sick payment, or retirement. In the pre-pandemic period, the proportion was 40%, reaching 72% during the pandemic. However, the survey revealed disparities in the access to online services, especially among people mostly impacted by the pandemic, such as those in low-income classes or living in rural area or with a low level of schooling, users with elderly users, 60 years or older. So I could give you a lot of information. We have conducted 3 waves of surveys during the pandemic to understand what changed in the use of public service before, because we have a long series, the data time series from the e-government survey conducted at the 3 levels of government, local, state level, and central government level. So we can compare the data before pre-pandemic and now. So all this publication is available. You can access, it's in English. But finally, I just want to highlight the fact that these results shows the importance of bringing digital inclusion to the political agenda and to the public debate on digital government. Digital inclusion is key to this debate. Thank you so much, Samia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Barboza. I really enjoyed everything you said, and it's really music to my ear that you conclude for a call for action for policymakers. And it would be really a shame that our policymakers around the world, once we're done with the pandemic, forget that this is all about investment in human capital for digital skills, investment in infrastructure for affordable, accessible broadband. So thank you so much for really pushing on the point of COVID as an exacerbator of the divide. I really, really like that. Thank you. So last but not least, we are moving to Serbia, where we're having Mrs. Nevena Manic, who is the advisor to the Prime Minister on digital government. Mrs. Manic, please.
Thank you, Samia. Thank you all very much. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. It is really incredible to hear experiences from colleagues around the world. So thank you for that. I would start by saying that both as individuals and as a society, I think COVID-19 was the ultimate test of our strengths and our capabilities, particularly meaning the investments, as Samia just mentioned, investments in human capital and infrastructure that was previously made. So in Serbia, focus on digitalization existed before COVID-19, but I think now the results of these continuous efforts are really widely visible. So currently in Serbia, the most popular e-service is vaccination, and the success of the vaccination rollout is owed to developed strengths in the field of digitalization, as well as an excellent system that is founded on simplicity and communication as key success factors. So the form for expression of interest for vaccination is very simple. No registration is required. It can be filled in by anyone. And this enables the government to know the demand before the vaccines arrive in the country. Which means that each dose is appropriated the moment it reaches Serbia. Communication is also crucial. So the citizen gets an SMS and an email with an exact date and time of the appointment, which kind of builds this trust between the citizen and the government. So here, the logistics of the vaccination is quite challenging because we offer 4 different types of vaccines. So people, when they opt for the vaccination, they can choose which of the vaccine manufacturers they're interested in taking. And this is very difficult because different vaccines have different shelf life, are packed in different doses, require different storage, and so on. And Serbia also donated and vaccinated people from abroad as well, and it showed the solidarity. And really, e-government in the end became a matter of national pride. And the e-government portal is now famous not just in Serbia, but in the region as well, because people from abroad also had to fill the form in when they expressed their interest to be vaccinated in Serbia. And now everyone is talking about digitalization. And really, this pandemic showed the vast usability of these services, and it really created the demand. And now we are, of course, strongly focusing on delivering. As Mr. Chan said, there is no turning back now after the pandemic. So this experience of online expression of interest is seen as the optimal model for other e-services as well. For example, enrollment in schools and kindergartens. So kindergarten enrollment is also completely electronic, and it provides a seamless service during and after the pandemic. So now the whole generation of children here in Serbia are enrolled in kindergartens electronically. There's a new e-service, My High School, and it also which was recently introduced, and it enables parents to, without going to a single institution, just with a few clicks on the portal, can enroll their children in high schools. eBaby is another e-service that is quite unique, and it enables parents to complete the entire administrative procedure regarding their newborn while the mother is still in the hospital. And 99% of babies in Serbia are e-babies, and their parents don't have to go anywhere once the baby is born. So everything, all the documentation is delivered to the address, and everything is done automatically. And up until now, thanks to e-government in Serbia, we saved over 180 million sheets of paper, which means we saved 18,000 trees. So an entire forest was saved while at the same time providing better public services and better government experience to citizens. The COVID-19 pandemic also showed the divide between the connected and the unconnected everywhere in the world, in Serbia as well. And this crisis reaffirmed the importance of our dedication to increasing connectivity. So this is also something that we have been investing previously, and our overarching goal is to provide broadband to 99% of households in Serbia by 2025. And Serbia plans to reach this goal by incentivizing private sector investments that can fund the rural broadband program. So where the commercial interest is not as strong, we are incentivizing private sector investments in order to reach the people living in sparsely located areas. Serbia is also introducing high-speed internet access, digital textbooks, and digital classroom in schools. The goal is to fully digitalize schools by the end of 2022. Serbia is also among the first countries in Europe to introduce coding and programming as mandatory subjects in primary school. So the idea is to teach children not what to think, but how to think, by developing their algorithmic and logical thinking. Apart from investing in digital literacy in children, we'll also launch retraining programs in IT for adults, so for people who are either employed or perhaps they decided to change their career path as a result. So to conclude, digital government is, I believe, the optimal path to a more transparent, more efficient, and in a way more inclusive government. So although yes, it can affect digital divides, and Mr. Barboza mentioned it and described it in an excellent manner, but I think that if used properly, it can actually lead to digital inclusion. And as we heard from Ms. Roach, the idea is to leave no one behind, but I would extend and say to leave no one offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Navina, for such a great exposition of what Serbia has done. I particularly like the accounting for the climate change savings, the 18,000 trees, the millions of pages of paper, and that overall, green approach to reforming public service. So thank you very much, Mrs. Manik. We have some questions, but I cannot resist as a moderator to go for another round to all our distinguished speakers and ask them, for a few minutes of their thought on this thing. For years with UNDESA, World Bank, and other partners, we've been preaching about digital government. And we are all obviously here part of the champions. But now it's evident that everybody else that was kind of resisting change, a more traditional way to look at public administration with paper and stamps, this is all going away. So just to make the point of all of what you're all making, for digital government to be the default, government being digital by default, what do you think are the most important actions that yourselves in your role can do to provide more data, more conviction for your governments to sustain and continue all these changes? So let's do the same order we had. I will start with Singapore, and then we'll go to Carol in the same order we started. So Mr. Chow, please, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to start with is policy. And you'll be surprised, right? It's it's not about technology most of the time. Technology is there. It's been there for a long time. I think what government struggles with, including Singapore, was really getting the policy that was initially very much focused on a non-digital way of doing things to a digital way of doing things. For example, let me give you a real example. The cloud computing has been there for ages, 15, 20 years. But the reality is that government found it very difficult to go to the cloud, mainly because the policy doesn't allow that. So once you don't have the policy that allows, and the kind of the processes that protects data onto the cloud, it will never happen. And I think by not doing that, you're missing out on a huge ecosystem that could transform digital government in a way whereby it's not just about the scale of transformation, it's about costs, right? If you can save like 50, 60% on infrastructure costs for the government, that is a lot of money. And that money can be used to do something a lot more progressive, like building better apps, etc. I think the second thing which I just wanted to mention is that beyond policy, is really getting people who truly understand the use of technology into government. Many policymakers and many people I know, you can't blame them because they are not technology people. So they just go into things like listening to people talk about trends like what blockchain and AI and all that stuff. And they forget that the more fundamental thing is to be done first before you talk about these things, and getting the right advice to the senior people within the government will make a big difference going forward. So I'll just leave at these two things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chen. And I have to say also, with my own knowledge of Singapore, the fact you have so many computer scientists, engineers, solution solvers that are part of that public policy making, and they bring in the intersection of best practices, digitization, and public service delivery. I think this is a very powerful marriage of skills that every government, in my opinion, should foster. So thank you very much, Mr. Chen. Let's move to the case of the Bahamas. Carol, if you had a few thoughts on my question, please.
Yes, I think Mr. Chen is quite right with regards to the cloud issue and policies. The best of, or the quickest way to provide an online service is go to the cloud, but we don't have the policy. Not only that, our data laws are written in such a way that we're not really allowed to have data, especially private information, to leave the country. So we had to come up with solutions where things are in country, on premise. So that was a big issue, to cloud or not to cloud. Secondly, standardization on data. I'm sorry to say the Bahamas is not the best on data collection, data retention, even to have an electronic format. So we did build an interoperability platform to try and help agencies to be able to talk to each other. But then again, you come back to, we need a memorandum of understanding before we can share this data. And then it goes right back again to policy. So I agree that, policy, and change to laws. And of course, we really cannot lose fact that we need to get out to the underserved communities. We need to keep them in view at all times. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. What excellent points. And if I can add to your comment on data sharing, this is a big issue. And I see all our clients struggle with that. And even when there are data sharing acts, sometimes the regulation behind it is not there. It's weak, it's contested. Even lawyers don't understand it. So again, having in government the capabilities to understand and implement, refreshing the justice system, and having more lawyers cognizant of digital legislation is so key. And we all know it's not going to happen overnight. But through webinars like these, we're all learning, and we can borrow good practices from what has worked in some of our client countries. Thank you so much, Carol. We move back to Bangladesh. I hope you guys are enjoying the travel around the world, participants, and hear from Mr. Chowdhury. Please.
Thank you, Samia. I'll quickly mention 6 things, and I will try not to take too much time. digital by default has to ensure access. So when we talk about access of citizens, because Bangladesh, the digital access, digital literacy is still quite low. We were able to ensure access with these thousands of digital centers across the country where citizens would come. So in the last 10 years, we've actually delivered over 500 million services from these digital centers. It's a massive number of services, and most people go to these centers because they don't have access directly. So access through internet, access through phones. I don't think we should forget that call centers, contact centers can actually provide very interesting access and not just internet. So one is access. Second is digitization must be preceded with simplification of service delivery. Because if we digitize inefficiency, it actually amplifies that. So simplification is key. Third is allowing a culture of experimentation within civil service. Because we don't want to take on a large failure, we want to allow small failures, and that allows for bigger successes. Number 4 is reward and recognition for digitization within the government. Because digitization, simplification requires taking risks, requires change of mindset, requires change of the way we do things. So unless you provide reward and recognition, most people will not actually take these risks. Number 5 is involving different types of innovators outside of the government. So students, research groups, startup companies, they actually come up with brilliant solutions for common problems, and then collaboration with these must be met. And the 6th one we've already mentioned, which is standardization for interoperability. Because if we create digital silos, then we don't get the benefits of digitization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chowdhury. What a clear list of priorities. I couldn't agree more with you. I want to also jump on something you said in the first part of your comments when you talked about how WhatsApp helped simplify and kind of eliminated a lot of the hierarchy to make decisions, going agile. So I think all these are things we learned as we went in the last 15 months, and hopefully they are becoming part of the culture of government, along with everything else you mentioned, which is so important, the ability to take risk, even reward risk takers, even if it's not 100% success, and learn, keep learning from it. So thank you very much for your thoughts. And as you know, this is, we're gonna have a summary of this session, and for colleagues on the chat line, participants, there's so much learning from these 5 countries that you can take back home. I know we have participants from Francophone Africa, etc. So much that you don't have to reinvent and learn from the case of our 5 countries here. So we now move back to Brazil with Mr. Barboza. Mr. Barboza, a few of your thoughts on my question, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samia. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, yes. Digital by default. This is something very important, and I would like to highlight 2 points that has been said from my previous colleagues. One is policy. We need policy to have to address 2 issues that I have mentioned in my first intervention. One is related to bridging the connectivity gap. Without connection, we don't have digital government to the whole population. And the second one is a digital skills gaps, the digital literacy gap. I would like to tell you that after 1 or 2 months after the pandemic started here in Brazil in March last year, the government decided for an emergency aid, financial aid to low-income population, etc. And the only way to access this service was through digital. So, and we have in Brazil, as in many countries, most people are connected through mobile only. They don't have multiple devices like notebook, desktop computer or tablet. They just access the internet through mobile. And they have very basic skills, instrumental skills only, to send messages on WhatsApp or post pictures in a social media network, etc. So people had very much difficulty in dealing with the applications that would allow them to access a financial resource from the government. This is a very complicated issue because they have access, but it is not a meaningful access. They need skills. So the policy is one of the key priorities to have digital by default. The second one, I would say that we have to break the silos that we still have in different areas in the government, like education, health, culture, social security. They don't talk to each other. The databases are like silos. So we need data integration. It was said already about data sharing. This is fundamental. If we don't overcome this barrier, it is very difficult to have a fully digital by default type of approach. We need to break, we need to integrate. And again, I would like to give you an example. What happened, this was almost overnight. It took, I guess, 2 weeks to be completed. In the beginning, the schools were closed overnight. Students went home. Most of them are connected through mobile phone. So connectivity is an issue. And the data package they have, when they have, is very, very low, does not allow streaming to receive educational content. So here in São Paulo, where I live, the local education secretary from the state of São Paulo made a very quick agreement with mobile operators for 0 rating to access educational services and educational content. This was one thing. The other thing was they made an agreement with a TV channel here in Brazil. The television network is fully digital. So we have an interactive channel that could be used for interactive type of interaction with between the students and the teachers and their peers. So this was a very quick response in terms of arrangement between public and private, mobile operators and the government to provide 0 rating to access educational content. So these are the 2 points, Samia, that I wanted to highlight: policy and data integration or data sharing. That was already been highlighted by previous speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barboza. We cannot emphasize these 2 points enough. It's years in the making, and I particularly want to appreciate the mobilization element that you mentioned. It's so important for a huge country like Brazil, decentralized, provincial, local government, just coming together and mobilizing very quickly to provide content and services. This is key. And I think COVID also is testing the ability of all governments to function as a whole of government, between the different silos, as we call them, between the different layers, central, federal, national, and that ability to work and adjust in an agile way. I think all governments have learned, and hopefully will be able to implement on a daily basis, not just for crisis mitigation. So thank you so much, Mr. Barboza. We now move back to Serbia with Mrs. Manik. If Navina, you could give me some of your thoughts on my question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Samia. It was great hearing excellent points from the colleagues on the panel. I think the pandemic really showed the vast usability of these services. And now, since the demand was created, I think it is up to the state to strongly focus on the delivering. And I think the mentality is shifting, especially in Serbia. Public administration is changing. And what our goal is to turn even the bureaucrats into bureaucratic entrepreneurs. And we are actually working on developing skills of civil servants by introducing them to emerging technologies. So we have the National Academy of Public Administration, and they really focus on expanding and developing knowledge of the policymakers here in Serbia on these new topics. And because the more they know, the more they will, the better policies they will create and implement. So we are working on developing skills by introducing them to emerging technologies in order to learn about the fourth industrial revolutions and the technologies such as blockchain, platform economy, Internet of Things, content management systems, smart contracts. So all these things, they have these trainings, developmental trainings to learn more and to understand the technologies that are emerging. And it is really important for them to know, as I said, in order to create and implement the best policies in this field. And we're also working on adding data scientists in every institution. So a team, one person with IT knowledge and one person, one lawyer in every institution. So they will, again, better understand the importance of digital innovation in government. And I think previously e-services were considered as an alternative way for people more prone to using technology or high-tech early adopters. So it was something, it was always like an alternative. But now, as I said, e-baby, 99% of babies are e-babies. So some services, if they are created simple, like we heard, so if they're simple enough, if they're easy to use, they become so widespread that now even the citizens are kind of putting these requirements from the government, and these are now becoming not just great additions, but actually expectations. And also it's really important, I think, to continuously improve the GX, the government experience. So it's really important to provide seamless, simple, and beneficial services in order to really enable that sustainability in digital government.
Thank you so much, Navina. This is great. All the points you made, and let me just appreciate what you said, bureaucratic entrepreneurs. This is a great title, I love that. And what you said to the reskilling of government in light of better e-services adopted by 100%, not 30 or 35%. I really like that. E-babies is a very good example. And we go back a bit, we're doing full circle with Mr. Chen, talking about data scientists and lawyers' expertise in digital as part of the public service function. Thank you so much. We have some questions and comments on the chat, and I want to give credit to all of them. Let me just start by reading, and some of them are translated, by the way. They're coming from Francophone colleagues. So thank you very much for asking the questions. We have a few participants from Africa that are keen to give us their feedback. So if I could just read one, COVID and containment strategies have accelerated digital transformation in much of the world, creating opportunities and challenges with possible increases in equality, increasing the need for appropriate governance mechanisms to mitigate the problem without hampering them first. New practices have affected our way of working, learning, exchanging, and interacting. These will not go away in a post-COVID environment. COVID-19 has shed light on the digital divide between global continent and even with countries. Nobody expected a second year of COVID-19 pandemic. So with the existing digital divide, now the digital bill will arise. This is from Francis. From Ministry of ICT Burundi. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Francis. Vous avez tout à fait raison. And we agree. This is why it's imperative. C'est vraiment impératif de répondre maintenant. And so if I can summarize at the end, the concrete steps I heard from our 5 speakers. I know that Vincenzo, Dennis, and the UNDESA team are translating all of that. And thank you. This is a lot of learning. We have another question, and I would like the panel to take that question in the order they would like. I'm not going to impose anything. Just raise your hand if you want to take it. So this is the question. Good evening. I am Martina Manzoni. I'm an Italian law student. Very good. We need more lawyers at the University of Milan. The degree thesis I'm currently writing is about the relationship between digitalization and sustainable development. So I'm extremely interested in this panel. My question is, do you think that digital transformation can help overcome inequalities, or will it increase them if we do not deal with the fundamental issues first, like discrimination, poverty, and hunger through the traditional way, quote unquote. Thank you very much, all panelists. So for Martina, whoever would like to take the question, we've addressed some of it already, but maybe reinforce some of the points. That would be great. Please go ahead and unmute your mic if you want to address it, panelists. So do we go? Okay, Anir, please go ahead. Anir, then Alexander.
It's a very important question. I think the devil lies in the details. So if we import technology that was actually designed and implemented in a certain way, in a different context altogether, then probably we will increase the divide. Because every country has a different context and we need to understand the context and the problems first. So just importing technologies, we can probably import devices, but the way it's implemented, for instance, I think we have studied Estonia and Singapore deeply to implement digital Bangladesh. And we thought when we started our journey about 12, 13 years ago, we thought importing many of the processes and the way the organizations are set up and the way leadership structure is done, we can import that, but we were actually mistaken. So we had to redo a lot of things and we learned from our failures and from our mistakes. So if you design it right, it can actually bridge divides. It can bridge education divide, it can bridge social divide, economic divide, and we have proven that in Bangladesh significantly. So as I was talking about, the digitization of judiciary actually created better access to justice for the people who actually had to live on bail, could live on bail. And now that has created the platform for a $300 million initiative. Just those 2 months of work has created the platform for a $300 million initiative to digitize the entire judiciary to increase access to justice. But if we do it wrongly, then people will not be able to access that system. If we impose internet where internet is not affordable, without doing the policy reform, spectrum reform, to lower the cost of internet, then if everything becomes available on internet, then only people who can afford and operate internet using devices will actually be at the better, or they will be at the better end of the spectrum, and a lot of people actually have the short end of the stick. So it's all in the way we understand context, design things right from a citizen's perspective. We have something called empathy training in Bangladesh, and about 6,000 civil servants have actually gone through it. And it's a design thinking process. We took materials from Stanford Design School and the UK innovation organization called Nesta, but then contextualize it, customize it in the context of Bangladesh. Without doing that, we would not have been able to develop empathy for the landless laborers in Bangladesh and so on and so forth. So I think it's really critical. Navina talked about the bureaucratic entrepreneurs. We have a term in Bangladesh called govpreneur, exactly the same thing. So just like an entrepreneur looks at profit as a way to maximize profit by doing right partnerships, doing the right marketing, by doing the right design, citizen-centric design. So we actually redefine profit in Bangladesh, which is a reduction of time, cost, and the number of visits. So reduction of TCV is the way we define profit for our govpreneurs. And that has become now policy. And there is a contract signed between the cabinet office with every line ministry to reduce TCV in every ministry. So I think there are ways to unpack it in the context. Again, context is key. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anir. Thank you. We'll go to Alexander for his comments.
Thank you, Samia. And the name of the person is Martina, I guess, huh? Martina, congratulations to explore this thematic and this relationship between digitalization and the SDGs. Really very important research. So congratulations. What I wanted to say and to share with you that in the UN high-level political forum 2 years ago, we from CETIC BR and UNESCO, we launched a policy paper that is called The Role of ICTs for the SDGs. And this paper explore for every single 17 SDGs, because ICTs, information communication technologies or digital technologies, has to do with every single SDG. When you go, for instance, SDG 1, end poverty, or SDG 16, you will find relationships. So it is very important. And also the ITU and UNDESA has also led a task force to explore at the measurement level, what type of indicators could be used to monitor the SDGs, I mean, ICT indicators. So there is a lot of discussions in this type of relation, exploring the relationship of the, digital technologies and SDGs. I would highly recommend you to see this paper. I can post the link online, and also the ITU work that was led by ITU and UNDESA on the measurement of ICT for the SDGs. But what I want to say is that although there is a very clear, in many aspects, let's say education, for instance, now it's a good example, SDG 4, because the schools are closed, we need ICTs. So all the equity and equitable and quality education relies on ICTs, on the digital. So we have many, many examples. But if for some, or innovation, for instance, in the industry, fundamental to have ICT. So ICT does touch every single SDG. But what is important is to raise awareness among policymakers to clearly understand this relationship. So research like yours that explore this relationship is a very good contribution to society, to policymakers. They need to understand this relationship so that countries can make real progress in achieving the 17 SDGs. So congratulations. I will try to find quickly the link for this paper, and I will put on the chat. Thank you, Naveen, Samia.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barboza. This is such a great clarification you provided. And let me just say that the chat room, these are not questions, but they're comments. And all the comments are, you know, great data, great learning. As much as you can share with the participants, that would be great. And we have a participant who also said there should be a sort of numeric solidarité, fond de solidarité numérique, like a fund for digital solidarity, which is not just only investments, but learning and knowledge transfer on policy advice. Because everything you're all mentioning now, nobody has this in any book. This is learning as we go in a field that progresses dramatically at a dramatic speed every day. And as much as we train, you know, students of public administrations or computer scientists, the practice of policy is what is being exchanged here, which is so worth it. We are getting closer to the end of the session, but I'm not going to close and conclude before I give all of you, my eminent panelists, a chance to say a few concluding words, things that you wanted to say and you didn't have a chance, or there was no question addressing that. So if you have, and let me be more specific, if you are directing your advice to the participants who want to learn from you, from the example of your country, and have the top 2 priorities to do today, to influence today, what would these be? So let me turn back to all of you, and if we follow back the same order we had, I'm going to start with Mr. Chan, and this is also the conclusion and the concluding thoughts on your part. So feel free to innovate in what you want to say. Let's start with Mr. Chan.
Yeah, I got a very simple advice, right? I think one of the most difficult things about digital government or this whole digital revolution is implementation. You know, everybody has an opinion. There are a lot of talks everywhere. You can read papers till you cry, but being able to implement is very important. And to implement, you got to start small. You know, a lot of people tend to get carried away by doing these mega projects, and they never succeed. You know, so we talk about agile. I'm a true believer in that, because you got to start small, do what we call MVP as much as you can. But the key is implementation, because I think for many governments, a lot of times that's the biggest challenge. And if nothing's implemented, then, you know, all the ideas just go away. You know, it really doesn't matter anymore. So I mean, this might really be my advice to everybody here. Start small, get something on the ground, make it happen. And once you start making it happen, you gain credibility. And getting credibility is important. People start believing that it can be done. And then that will just basically escalate over time. And that's what we did in the beginning, right? We started very small, but the key is to get it implemented. You know, if we can't do it, then it doesn't matter anymore. It's not just about PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chen. Excellent advice. So many digital government activities that never complete because it's exactly what you said. It's not followed through. Start small and scale up. Excellent. We now go to Karen. Karen?
Okay. I'd like to, again, jump off from where Mr. Chan left off. It's important to start small. So we had to turn to a lot of platforms that already existed. And our champion platform was SharePoint. And we just got so many solutions out for agencies. Now they're knocking on the door. We want. So for example, with our permanent secretaries, we created a shared space for collaboration. And I think Bangladesh had said that you started to break down silos. People started to talk to each other. And we're finding that with this one solution, this one small solution, we've started opened a can of worms. Everybody wants to do it. So I think now, but though we have to look at the small ones. Usually we do look at these huge things. Look at the small ones. You'd be surprised at how much traction you'll get, and more people will become more accustomed to using your solutions. So I agree. Focus on some of the small aspects so you don't get overwhelmed, and gain some successes, and you'll gain trust from your citizenry, from your citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. So wise and true. Absolutely. Let's move to Anir now, and Mr. Chowdhury.
Thank you, Samia. I was just thinking what I should say. I think both my previous speakers have talked about small is beautiful. So I would support that. In 2008, when we started the journey, we started developing vision documents, big vision documents. What I felt was the documents were less useful, but the process of visioning was very useful. So we involved many different tiers of government, many different departments working together, and the private sector and academia as well. So that collaboration, thinking together to solve problems, I think was very useful. And then the small solutions to the two speakers who just spoke before me was important. We had 53 quick wins that we identified, one per ministry. So basically said to every ministry, do one small thing, but all of you have to do it, one small thing towards citizen service delivery. And that actually made a huge difference in terms of developing confidence. We're doing the same thing for all ministries now on fourth industrial revolution technologies. So it's not just digital, but the combination of digital, physical, and biological in the way that the future is actually unfolding. So we're now looking at, so we just did a workshop on agriculture. So I think those two things I will talk about, that work together to solve problems, and then find something that can be done in a matter of months. And COVID actually showed us that it can be done in a matter of days. So lessons from COVID should really be kept in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chowdhury. And I really like the 53 quick wins, one per ministry. There's accountability, but there's also a quest for results. And you're making it easier with them. It's not the most complicated service. It creates a lot of ownership. Thank you so much. Very good. Mr. Barboza.
Well, in one single word, multi-stakeholder approach. I think that we are living in such a complex environment. The digital environment is very complex. The government has to listen to different stakeholders, being citizen and society, one of them, but private sector, civil society organization, international organizations. There is not, in my opinion, it is not possible to do the government alone. So multi-stakeholder approach, I think that is the umbrella approach that everything has to fit in this umbrella. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barboza. Absolutely, absolutely. Let's move now to Navina.
So I would just like to, what we mentioned about digital inclusion. I think that the two basic preconditions about this is the digital literacy and digital connectivity for all citizens. So it is really important to invest in retraining in IT in adults, as well as learning children about the digital world, and also digital connectivity, because it's really important for everyone to be connected in order to really use all the benefits of the digital government. And I really think that it is the duty of the state to bridge this digital divide, while at the same time continuing to pay close attention to the most vulnerable social groups and those most likely to be excluded. And another point that I would like to make is that I think international cooperation is really very, very important. And it really proved to be crucial in Serbia during the pandemic. We shared experiences with our colleagues around the world, how they dealt with the crisis and what good ideas they had, but not only during the pandemic. I think that we should never reinvent the wheel because there's so much that we can learn. For example, from countries like Singapore, we know about the Sing Pass. I think now it's MyInfo, and we are very inspired by this amazing service and the vast development that Singapore is making in this field. And I think that in the end, what I can say that what remains after the pandemic, and I hope that we can already see the end, especially with the vaccination rollout in Serbia, we hope to achieve the collective immunity in a few months. But I think what must remain is the lesson of efficiency and usability of public e-services. And I think that the possibility for utilization is so great that this is a lesson that we must keep after we are back to the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Manik. And thank you all panelists for your great concluding thoughts. We're getting closer to the session's end, and I apologize in advance for the participant who had comments and questions we could not address, but this is not a one-time off. I mean, the UNDESA has been working on this for the last 20 years. So digital government is a topic followed very closely. As Navina said, there is a lot of collaboration at the international level. I am from the World Bank and I participate very closely with UN colleagues. This is a joint agenda of collaboration and cooperation. All the panelists identified, in my view, two key areas that we really have to go in right away and in all countries implement while it's hot. Implement, because this is the point that all of you made. It's hot because the pandemic is still there and there's still a sense of urgency before we go back to life or business as usual. So the role of the UN agencies, of the donors, of the multilaterals, of the foundations, as they provide funding for digital government is key. The role of the private sector, the solution providers, is key in collaboration with governments. And the best nexus, in my view, is a combination of public sector know-how on services and, what you all call the govpreneurs, the bureaucratic entrepreneurs, combined with the knowledge of ICT innovators, whether they're global or local, to improve government services. And that I would like to see more of in every country, along with the knowledge exchange that we all have here between your 5 countries and the rest of the world, because as you said, no need to reinvent the wheel. This is fundamental. Every citizen needs an ID, needs to interact with government, register their children, get their vaccination. So there's like at least 80% reusable know-how that can be convened and shared. And I want to thank very much the UN, by the way, for convening this excellent 3-day conference, but this particular panel. In my conclusion, in addition to the role of the PPPs between agencies, multilateral government, academia, etc., I want to say that my personal dream, if you will, is that really in a few years, the 30 or the 40% that we talk about now using online services are boosted to 100%, with really everybody included, and the service quality and the service flow very much oriented to the people, you know, what we call people-oriented end user journey for all of these. And I think many governments are getting there, and we can learn a lot from the 5 countries. There is a fear that this may eliminate jobs, that this may change. Of course, this will change things, but it will create more jobs. Every study that the World Bank, the UN, the big think tanks have done indicates very strongly that when we move to a digital economy, and digital government is one of the pillars of digital economy. The others are like digital infrastructure, digital skills, etc. As we move towards a digital economy, and some of the advanced countries we have, 25% of their GDP comes from digital economy. We will create more jobs, except these jobs will be a little bit different from today. So all you said about investing at the public and private sector level in digital skills for every one of the countries, investing in digital entrepreneurs, this is key. And this is when discussions happen every year in every country. Ministers of finance have to make sure they have that line budget there for digital infrastructure, digital government, and digital skills. And a lot of time, these investments are not too big. For example, on digital skills, I'm working a lot on this in the last 2 years. A lot of the content and services exist already. The schools are there. It's a question of bringing these to the teachers, bringing this to the university, and rolling it out at a massive scale, not thousands, but to millions and billions of people. And I think that's where the amazing challenge lies, but the opportunity to have these new jobs in these new and growing fields. So this is a little bit what I wanted to conclude. I'm not going to repeat what every one of the speakers said, but I want to offer my very sincere appreciation and admiration to all you're doing. It takes a lot of work. Many of you don't sleep enough, I'm sure, but the results are showing, and you are leading your countries towards that aspired vision of digital transparency, participation, and better services to citizens. I also want to conclude by thanking the sponsors, the organizers of this session. Of course, our UNDESA leadership team, Vincenzo, Dennis, and all the teams behind them. And want to conclude by saying you will get also a little transcript of the discussion and sharing of the knowledge and the data that many of the speakers presented. So with the organizers' permission, I'm going to stop here, and maybe Dennis or Waime or Vincenzo, you want to say some closing comments?
No, Samia, you can close on behalf. Please.
Okay, thank you so much, and a virtual applause to everyone. Sincere thank you to panelists and participants. Hope to see you again very soon.